Assata Shakur could only be captured by narrative. In the immediate moments after her death, we're already seeing where from the right to the nominal left, there's an attempt to rebrand, reframe, and misrepresent who she was and the struggle she represented and fought for. On the right, we get Disney, ABC News, state-sponsored spin. And from the nominal left, we get a black capitalist, Cop City supporter, falsely associating with Assata for the purposes of not only rebranding who she was and what she represented, but who he is and what it means to be a left, liberal, progressive, so-called activist in 2025. This first one was actually sent to me by an apolitical loved one who knew I would be interested in the passing of Assata Shakur, but who is admittedly not super familiar with the context and the politics and the history. But I think it speaks to exactly the point and the problem I'm wanting to quickly highlight here. That for those who are politically uneducated or undereducated or underaware of this history and its context, the manipulation and the framing of the story, and even the willingness and the interest in the mainstream in covering the story at all is, again, I think very telling and it's somewhat important for us to consider. Assata Shakur, wanted Black Liberation Army member, dies at 78 in Cuba. So, admittedly, it's speculation, but we could assume how little is ever discussed in mainstream ABC News, Disney-sponsored media about the history of the Black Liberation Army at all. So that it's mentioned here is already setting up a certain frame. As the subtitle here says, also known as Joanne Chesimard, she was convicted for murdering a trooper. There you go. Black Liberation Army convicted of murdering a trooper, dies in Cuba. The story ends up proceeding from there to be more about the slain officer than Assata herself or the struggle that she was involved in the first place. So it just immediately goes to a discussion of her conviction for the murder of Trooper Werner Forrester and subsequent escape, which garnered her a permanent spot on the New Jersey State Police's most wanted list. Okay. It mentions that she broke out but it just says here, in May 1973, Shakur and two other members of the Black Liberation Army, BLA, an underground militant group, were pulled over on the New Jersey Turnpike by Trooper Forrester and another highway officer. During the confrontation, a shootout ensued, killing Forrester and one of the passengers in the car. So they not only leave out the other officer, but they leave out reference to Zaid Shakur, Sundiata Acoli, and anyone else, because it might lead people to wonder, well, what then exactly happened? Who did the shooting? What was really going on? Why were they pulled over in the first place? What is the New Jersey State Police's history with right-wing conservative politics, including a very Nazi-like uniform that was selected for its Nazi similarities on purpose, and so on and so on. So all of that is ignored so that the frame can be of a slain officer killed by this woman who has been wanted for all these years and just died. I was convicted by, I don't even want to call it a trial, it was a lynching by an all-white jury, Shakur told BET in 2001. I had nothing but contempt for the system of justice under which I was tried. Amazing that interview took place in 2001 on BET, and it'd be fascinating if BET had ever been an outlet that would have fostered routine discussion and focus on these histories, but that's another discussion for another time. The FBI had offered a $2 million reward for her capture, which was, of course, raised to $2 million under Barack Obama, under Eric Holder's attorney general, and announced by a black FBI agent at the time. A joint statement from New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy and State Police Superintendent Colonel Patrick Callahan on Friday said that they had spoken with Secretary of State Marco Rubio in the wake of Shakur's death. They said they would vigorously oppose any attempts to repatriate her remains to the U.S. Unlike his killer, Trooper Forrester never had a chance to live out his days in peace, the joint statement said, but we remain fully committed to honoring his memory and sacrifice. So you can see that there's the immediate framing there. For people who are not immediately aware or understanding of the context, This is how she's depicted. This is how the history of Black liberation struggles, and including the more militant wings of it, are depicted. And we get more concern for the slain officer than any honest depiction of what led to that killing, who was actually responsible for it, or why Assata would have rightfully been engaged in the activities that she was involved in at the time, and for which she should forever be considered a hero. But I actually think it gets worse than that, because here we get this statement from Killer Mike, who, as I've covered enough about, never mind the disagreement over my own work, but his rampant and vigorous support of the police, of Cop City, of Black capitalism, his doing tracks for Defense Department video games, and in helping promote psychological warfare through video games. And then for him to come back on Instagram and post this saying, quote, "Thank you, job well done. You have joined our ancestors untouched by this wicked government. You are a hero. We love and appreciate you deeply as always. May our children never forget your name and your work on our behalf for freedom and justice. God bless our dead and protect our living. R.I.P. Assata Shakur." I find this to be wildly disingenuous and an effort to rebrand not only Assata as more in line with the liberal politics of a Killer Mike, but to rebrand the liberal politics of a Killer Mike as being in league politically with the work of Assata Shakur. This, to me, is worse and more of a challenge and a threat to critical thinking and radical political consciousness than Disney and ABC's rebranding and reframing and abuse, narrative abuse. That is more easily dismissed and exposed. This kind of approach, which I think we're going to see more and more of as more radical elders pass away and new generations seek to attain relevance and leadership, in a context and in a situation where where it's understood you cannot come out and condemn Assata in the same way you can't come out and condemn Malcolm X or Dr. King. You can come out and falsely associate and rebrand their efforts as something you are continuing, and have this give undue legitimacy and credibility to people who are not actually carrying on that legacy and that work and that analysis and that form of struggle. So that's why, and I'm going to leave the links in the show description, that I think it's so important that people like Jared Ware, Millennials Are Killing Capitalism, did the tribute that they did yesterday. I think it's important what we did earlier today on Saturdays with Renee, and I'm going to leave you with my reading of the statement Dhoruba bin Wahad just released in the aftermath of Assata Shakur's death, so that we can leave, at least here, with the appropriate political clarity, analysis, and framing that needs to be carried forward and be brought in to challenge those from both the left, the nominal left, and the right, who want to rebrand, reframe, and misrepresent Assata Shakur and the struggle she fought for and worked within and represented. I'll leave you with the words from Dhoruba: peace and power to him, rest and power to Assata Shakur, and peace to us all, only if we're willing to fight for it, like Fred Hampton used to say. And I'll see you next time right here at I Mix What I Like. But if I can, so this is just quoting Dhoruba here. Of course, the passing of my comrade friend, the sister Assata, is a very emotional occasion for all who loved and respected her. I won't be reduced to one-liner reflections of her passing, however. This is because her passing sheds light on this historical moment, because Black people and all African peoples find themselves. There's a very deep and significant reason why Assata found refuge and protection in Cuba, how she was able to live her life in relative freedom rather than languish in a racist American gulag. It was Cuba that always supported the radical and militant Black struggle against the ethno-white Christian settler state project, the self-proclaimed Democratic Republic of the United States. Once a Latin American colony seized from imperialist Spain and ruled by American stooges, Cuba was a whorehouse for American gangsters, and its people, the majority of whom are of African ancestry, led by Fidel Castro, overthrew the despotic American arrangement. But unlike Haiti, the Cuban Revolution was never reversed by U.S. military intervention, and so the U.S. put in place an economic embargo of Cuba that remains to this day. All during the decades of the 50s, 60s, 70s, up until today, Cuba has supported African struggles for freedom, independence, and development. Cuba gave refuge to those of us forced into exile by the machinations of the FBI, CIA, COINTELPRO campaigns. Kwame Ture, Eldridge Cleaver, and dozens of persecuted Black activists have passed through Cuba fleeing racist American government repression. Assata's passing in Cuba, therefore, was a living testimony to this history and should cause everyone opposed to the current racist pogroms carried out against Latin American migrants by ICE and the U.S. federal government to recognize that U.S. immigration policy to make America white again has everything to do with white America's sociocultural DNA as a European settler state and its exploitation of the Caribbean and Latin America, from where the majority of so-called illegal immigrants come. White supremacist domination at home and abroad has everything to do with the black people with black people in the U.S., the default scapegoats and victims of American jingoistic white skin privilege and political rule of the rich. Assata was our freedom fighter, a soldier in the BLA, a member of one of the original Black Panther Party when it defended the existential integrity of the Black community. She was a stalwart in our resistance to state-sanctioned murder of Black people by the police and white militias in blue costumes. She's our 20th century Sojourner Truth, our anti-imperialist Harriet Tubman in a protracted war imposed on African people since 1619. We need not get it twisted and compare mourning the demise of a racist punk like Charlie Kirk with honoring the spirit of an Assata Shakur or MLK. Black people have been at war with the ethno-white supremacist state since the 15th century, and Assata was a generational soldier in this ongoing war against the very notion of Black freedom and humanity. So don't ask whether Assata was guilty or innocent of shooting an armed agent of the state that revile our very existence as people. Assata was guilty of being a freedom fighter. She was innocent of collaborating with the enemies of Black dreams. Long live the spirit of Assata Shakur. Live like her. Dhoruba bin Wahad, West Africa, September 27th, 2025.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.